our next storyteller is Marian Fontana. She has a book, The Widow's Walk, a memoir of 9/11. She's a triple threat, playwright, storyteller. She can do everything. So, Marian,
I can't sell real estate.
no, that's it.
John, will you move the music set? Sure. All right. Thanks, John.
Woo!
Thank you. Thanks for coming out to Queen. I've never been out here. I've never been to a train until the last stop. That's exciting. So John asked me to tell a story, so that's what I'm going to do. So I met my husband in college. I was a freshman. I was 18 years old. I was a music major, and he was a sculpture major. We dated for 10 years, and then we got married. Our wedding invitation said, "At last." And Dave chose, he had become a firefighter, a job that he loved even more than sculpting. And so he chose September 11th because he wanted to tell everyone he got married on 9/11. It was a beautiful day, and 2 years later we had our son Aiden. And then on September 11th, 2001, our 8th wedding anniversary, we all know what happened. My life turned upside down, backwards, and round. And it was my son's second day of kindergarten. I had a 2-month Shiva with friends and neighbors and everyone coming into my house because we didn't know what was going on. 2 weeks after 9/11, they tried to close my husband's firehouse. So I had been a teacher in the neighborhood for 8 years. I had a lot of students, and all my kids came with their parents making signs, and we managed to keep the firehouse open. And that protest threw me in the unwitting spotlight for almost every event that happened at 9/11. The firefighters started calling me about the site, saying they weren't checking the trucks for body parts well enough. So I formed a not-for-profit to give families information. I was working with medical examiners, politicians, going to meetings, going to Washington. I was overwhelmed, to say the least. And my friends, my fellow widows, had started dating. And I couldn't even think about dating. My world was spinning so fast with single parenting and funerals and meetings. I didn't even consider it. But my friends just kept calling, going, "Marian, you really need to go out on dates. It's been 2 years." And I'm like, okay. Now, I met my husband when I was 18. I'd never dated. I don't even know how to date. I don't even know what you do. So my friends were calling, they're checking their Rolodexes, that's what they were called back then. And they would find somebody, and there was always a caveat. He's a great guy. He's an alcoholic. Great guy, he's a workaholic. He's been divorced 5 times. He's separated. He lives in the basement. That he shared the house with his wife. I heard it all, and I would get excited because they'd tell me this great thing, and I was always waiting for the but. And my friend Dee Dee was relentless. She called every week. She's like, "I found this great guy, Drew. He's perfect for you. He has a little disease." And I said, what is it? And she said alopecia. And I'm like, "Oh, is it fatal?" And she's like, "No, you lose all your hair. You can't grow hair." I'm like, "Oh, that's good. Maybe I'll catch it on my face." And then he called and said he didn't want to date a public figure. And he was uncomfortable. So that was that. And then she calls again. I found a really sweet guy. He's a journalist. He's smart. He's creative. He's funny. He's a little short. I'm like, "Okay, how short?" And she's like, "Well, how tall is Aiden?" And Aiden's my 7-year-old son at the time. So I did go out with him, by the way. But I had to talk to him. That's really short. Anyway, so there's, websites. There's no dating sites at this point. And my friend tells me about a thing called nerve.com, which is kind of a magazine online that in the back has these personal ads. And so you have to fill out this huge thing, and they ask you everything. What's your favorite color? Where do you want to travel? And I fill it all out, and I get a call from a guy named John. And we start talking, and he's actually really nice. He's an actor. Turns out we went to high school together, but he wasn't in the same year. And so we decide to make a date. So this is going to be my first date. And he picks Katz'S Deli, because one of the questions on this monumental thing we had to fill out was, if you could be anywhere right now, where would you be? And I put Katz'S Deli eating a corned beef and rye, of course. And so we choose to meet, and it's hot. It's August hot, and I am so nervous. I haven't been on a date since I'm maybe 16, and I kind of feel that old. I'm that insecure. I'm like, oh my God, I'm standing in front of the store. He's late. So he calls, and he's like, I'm really sorry. The F train's not running. I'm going to take the crosstown bus. And I'm like, okay. And I'm pacing back and forth. I'm trying not to sweat too much. And the bus pulls up and stops, and it goes, and I'm like, oh no. I started a monologue in my head. I'm like, oh my God, what if he's, oh my God, what if he has issues? What if he's handicapped? What if he's, I don't know if I could take care of someone. I start spinning. And sure enough, the guy comes up, and he has a disability. He's got 2 canes, and he comes up to me, and he says hello, and I say hi, and he's very friendly, he's very nice, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's a cafeteria. Do I hold the tray? Should I not hold the tray? How do we do this? And he was so comfortable. I'm the one freaking out. I go get my corned beef and rye. He's like, hey, you want a brown soda? I'm like, sure. And we sit down, and I'm just so flustered. He's like, what's wrong? And I said, well, I don't know how to say this. I don't mean to be rude, and I don't want to seem shallow, but I didn't know you had a disability. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I got hit by a cab, he tells me. I don't think it was John. He got hit by a cab. He broke both legs, both hips, and he was waiting for titanium hip replacements. He was so young, they didn't want to give him the old ones because they'd wear up. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, and by the way, you didn't tell me your situation. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, I Googled you. Now, this is 2002. I didn't even know what Google was. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I Googled you. And of course I'm like, oh, I'm going to go home and Google myself. I don't even know if that, it sounds dirty. And so there's a lot of information about you. I'm very sorry about your husband, but you didn't tell me any of that. And I said, you know what, you're right, and I'm sorry, and I should have told you. I wanted one night to just go out, not talk about 9/11, not talk about firefighters, not talk about any of it. I just wanted to have a date. And right when I say that, I swear to God, this happened, I can't make this up. There's a thump, and the guy two tables over collapses onto the ground, and someone's like, someone call 911. Everyone starts opening their phones. The wife is opening his shirt. Dave taught me that if you call a firehouse directly, it's better because, and so I know 33 engines around the corner, so I call them directly, like, hey, it's Marian Fontana. I'm at Katz'S Deli, there's a guy having a heart attack. So 2 minutes later, they come clanking in, and there's all these young guys I don't recognize, but I know a couple of the guys. They start, giving him oxygen, administrating. They didn't do CPR. He was actually okay. They were bringing him to the hospital. His color was returning. Everyone's relieved. And then they recognize me. They're like, Marian, hey, what are you doing here? And I'm like, not only am I still terrified, but I'm also don't remember names very well. And so I'm just throwing out Irish, hey, Dennis, Sean, Brian, how are you? And then they come over and they start talking to me, and I introduce them to John, and it's, he goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm on a date. And they're like, oh, can't get rid of us. Making jokes. And so finally they leave, and we sit down, and we're eating our sandwiches, and I said, yeah, wow. And he's like, well, I'd love to see you again because that is the best date I've ever had. And that's the end of my story.